The other thing I'm doing, guys, is I'm a big advocate for modern fans. If you've watched any of my auto or van life stuff where I worked on trucks and vans, you know I don't like these old style metal fans. People don't work on the shrouds correctly. They don't watch their hands correctly. I've seen kids lose fingers doing that. I've seen them do it. So don't reuse these old metal fans if you have the capability of getting something new and modern and converting it to a newer system. So I didn't have cause to do this before, and when I R&R'd the engine years ago, I just hurried up and put it all back together with the parts I had because I was in a literal hurry. I had to get back to work. But I have time today, and this is my second vehicle, not my main vehicle. It's my second vehicle. I'll be okay. So I'm going to take my time and do what I got to do to fix this properly, okay? We're going to eject the shrouds, completely get rid of them. We're going to eject the fan, the factory steel one, you know, the finger cutter, and we're going to do all that and get this thing a little bit more modernized. It increases fuel economy because you're not constantly belt driving that fan even when you don't need it, and it's safer. And for those two reasons alone, I'm going to do it. And then the third reason is the fans, if you control them with the proper temperature devices, you can actually do a better job of keeping the engine cool at the right time, but letting it stay warmer at all other times, which runs a little bit more efficient and keeps your defrost better in the winter. So you get more temperature control with a modern fan system. It's safer, better mileage. I'm doing it, okay? I stopped by Summit Racing and got this assembly right here for the fan controller. So I'll show you how to wire that up. One end goes into the positive of the battery. The other connector goes into this switch that goes in the manifold. When it gets hot enough, it switches on. That turns the little coil on in the relay. And then the thicker gauge wire will drive the actual fan itself. The fan I picked up at AutoZone. They just happen to have one in stock that would fit that size. It would work for what I want to do. And while I'm doing the hoses, I thought I'd do another thermostat. Thermostat's in there working just fine, but it's a few years old, so we'll just throw another thermostat on it. I'd set the thermostat at 195 degrees, and I got a fan switch that comes on at 205. You need your fan switch to turn on after your thermostat opens because you don't want the fan constantly running while you're driving down the road. So to make sure that the fan only comes on when it needs to, set your thermostat a few degrees less than your fan. I'd say 10 to 15 degrees would be a good delta. Alright, so we got a fan controller, we got a fan, we got a switch and an adapter to screw it into an old school Chevy small block, thermostat. We got everything we need, guys. We're ready to go. Alright, this lower fan shroud's clipped in down there on something. Oh, nope. It was hung up onto the fan. See if we can yank it up out of there if it's on. Okay, it's got some wires zip tied to it. I'm gonna crawl under there, unhook the wires with the zip ties, get that chassis electrical stuff loose. It's probably headlight wires or whatever. Get them off of there. Get that lower shroud out of there because we're not going to reuse that. And then we're going to remove this fan off the pump. So getting these nuts off of the fan can be challenging. Now that we got the radiator out of the way and we have access, we're going to pull this fan off. And these are the 4 nuts that Chevrolet used to hold them on. They happen to be 13 mil or half, depending on what year vehicle you have. Let me show you how tight that one was just from rust and age to get off. When you try to turn this, well, that one cracked loose on its own. Okay, so that one, this was not required. That one came off fairly easy. This other one right there, when I took it off, I had to do this with my left hand and hold it. I had to hold the belt and the pulley because there was just barely enough force on the tightness of that nut that it wanted to spin the belt. So I had to actually hold that so that it would crack loose. Let's see how this one goes. Now pay attention, guys, when you're doing this. if something slips and you strip out something, or you're not on that wrench good, or it lets go, and you jam your hand into that fan like that, man, you can really tear yourself up. So be careful getting these off. Always imagine as you're stroking through the wrench, where's your hand gonna go? What could it hit? What could it get to, you know? Okay, that one cracked loose also without having to hold the belt. All right, now this is an interesting challenge. I loosened that one while we were talking. I backed it out, but look, the stud came out with it instead of just the nut coming off. So the way you handle that situation is we're going to have to get the other ones off and pull the whole fan off with the stud and all, and then work with it off the vehicle. We'll hold the stud with a pair of vice grips on the back or something and get that nut out of there. Depending on how we space that pulley to bolt it down. Or if we just sawzall the fan off the shaft and leave the flange, we could just work it right back on there like it is. We'll make that decision as we get there. But I'm going to put the camera down and get the other two nuts off, get the fan off the vehicle. Okay, as I'm loosening up that fourth stud, that pulley is getting crooked and the belt tension is pulling everything wonky and making it hard to work. So this is a good spot now. I don't need the belt to hold that tight anymore to crack any of them loose. They're all four loose. Now I got to get the belt off to be able to better work with that pulley and that flange. So watch your belts, guys. Take a picture of how they run before you take them apart. You know, in this case, for me, it's easy. I'm making a video. I could just go back and watch the video. But you guys at home, you take these belts off, you don't know how they run. You know, that's the smooth side with no grooves, so that's obviously going to run on the smooth side of the belt. This has grooves, so it's obviously going to have grooves on that side of the belt. So if you use that to get yourself out of trouble, it can help. But it's a lot easier to just step back and look and see how the belt goes. You know, it always has a super tight wrap around the crank. And what do I mean by that? That belt loops over that water pump and goes 270 degrees or more around that crank. Okay? It doesn't have to wrap much around an idler. It's just putting tension on it. It doesn't have to wrap too much around an alternator because there's not really a whole lot of mechanical load on that. It's just spinning. There's resistance and magnetic pushback, but it's not bad. This was an idler that was put there in place of an AC compressor. If it was an AC compressor, it wouldn't be too bad. But that crank is a heck of a mechanical load. It's driving and it's got to be tight. So you see how they put a 270 degree wrap on the belt around that. A lot of thought and process goes into how they engineer these things, guys. You got to put it back the way it goes or it won't fit. So here's how you get the belts off on these old things. See how I did that, guys? That's how you do that. I just took tension off the tensioner and then pulled it off the alternator, and now it's loose. Okay, now it's not pulling on anything, and we can finish working on our fan. So once I had the fan off the vehicle, the studs and nuts easily separated. I didn't even need to use vice grips. They came off by hand. So they didn't pull out of here by hand. I had to loosen that with a wrench, but they separated from each other. I got the four nuts off the studs and was able to put the studs back in the pulley. So now your question is, how do you keep this from happening? How do you prevent that? Okay, well, obviously we're going to take all four of these and nice and evenly torque that down, keep everything straight so it's got a solid hold. But do we want to just stack washers up on there? We could. That would probably be okay. You could take a nut that was a little bigger in thread. The reason it's got to be bigger is you don't want to make it. Let me pull one of these studs back out so you can see how they're made. You have to take that space up right there. You have to take that space up and leave the nut out here. If you let it work all the way down there, you could bottom out before you apply enough torque. You don't want the nut to bottom out. Okay? So you want the nut to be torquing back here where it's designed to torque. Hopefully I'm not too close with the camera messing that up. So you want to take this nut and have it torquing back here, so you need space there. You can use washers, or you can just take another nut that's bigger that just slips over that doesn't, you know, it's not small enough to grab it, but it's big enough to slide. Or you can do what I'm going to do, because I got a Sawzall. You just cut this off real deep down by the fan, you know. Then again, I could probably get $50 for this vintage fan. It's a real Dayton, Ohio vintage Chevy fan that still works great, and the clutch inside of it's still good. Maybe I should sell this on eBay for $50. I'm not gonna say $20 is $20, but $50 is $50. So, yeah, let's space these out with a nut and just torque that down. It's a nice shiny surface on that pulley right there, but all it is a flange for the water pump. That's all it is. If that gets rusty and nasty, it really doesn't matter. It really truly doesn't. So let's go find some nuts that fit over these. Okay, so I found a couple of crush washers that would work. The thickness of one is not enough to take up the amount of space I want to take up. So I got 2 for each one. I got a total of 8. So 2 of those crush washers mashed together will take up enough space that I can get these nuts to torque down. So that's what we're going to do. I'll show you when it's finished. Alright, now in order to torque these bolts, guys, or these nuts down on these studs, we're going to have some resistance. How are we going to get our resistance back? Well, we're going to just put the fan back on. I mean the belt back on. There we go. I'll tighten these down by hand just to get them pressure, you know, started, and then put the belt on, and now we should be able to torque them down and get the right amount of, you know, torque on. Yeah, there, it's holding it just fine now. That clicking you hear is the sound of the lock washers engaging and slipping. So we'll torque this one down so we go evenly across the face. There we go, I got that tight. Got that tight. To keep driving it, get some money out of it, keep it going. But this will keep this from falling down into that belt and causing any trouble. Okay, guys, I'm gonna put a little bit of tape around it, and then we're gonna fire it up and get her started. Okay, guys, the instructions on this fan say to poke these through the cores of the radiator. You know, line up the fan down in the center and poke them through, and then they have these little clips on there that they want you to push, and they tell you to run this right up against the radiator. You know, I know they want some kind of an impromptu pseudo air seal there, but I'm not putting that right on the radiator. I think it's going to wear through and make holes. So what I'm going to do is hang the top of the fan off of this bracket here, which is much stronger than any of those cores. Okay, that right there has got real strength to it compared to any of the cores, and I don't want to hang the fan off the cores. I'm sorry, I just don't want to do it. So I'm going to zip tie through these holes. I'm going to figure out which holes line up best. The higher the better, so probably these two, and zip them out to a couple of these holes and let the fan kind of hang down the backside. And then I'm going to pad this. I'm I'm going to pad this surface off 1/8 of an inch with like some weather stripping or some padding or some foam or something. You know, like this kind of stuff that I got when I was putting the sandblast cabinet together. You know, we'll run some of this stuff, you know, like that down the back of the radiator. Kind of pad it just a little bit. And then on the bottom, after it's hanging off the top, you know, after it's hanging up there and all the weight is on that core, then I'll go ahead and push the other two through and secure the bottom that way. I'll take these, use them as pilot holes, go through, you know, figure out where the holes are. Is the shock springs that they give for expansion and contraction to keep everything from immediately failing. Is designed to run in these little grooves right here, like that, with this coming through. You just do that on the one side, and then the lock is a similarly sized device on the back that you would pad with this. So I'm not going to go all the way around the edges, though you could, but if it frayed off and got in the fan, it could make a mess or be a problem. So I don't think you need that tight of an air seal for this to work. I hope you don't. So I'm gonna just do it like this and zip tie that up and let that squeeze against the radiator and give it some padding. I just don't feel comfortable jamming that plastic right up against those cores. Okay, so I found these two holes that line up exactly with two of the outer bracket holes, and it sets the fan kind of flush on the radiator, and it looks like it's going to work perfect. And we're using the strength of this, you know, top of the radiator bracket to hold the fan weight, not the cores. So I am going to go ahead and put the 4-core support pull-through straps on. I'm not going to drive down the road with a radiator hanging off the top, because it can't flop around, and it will provide extra support, and I'm going to go ahead and put them in and use them. But I didn't want all the weight of the fan dangling on the cores. Right now it's dangling on these, and then all these do is just kind of secure it from flopping around. They don't have to take the weight of it, and I think the radiator will live a lot longer that way. And then these are the little pads that go behind the locks when you get it in the final position, so that this pulls up against the radiator, and there's some padding there, at least for the lock side of it. So I'm going to go ahead and get these pushed through. Let's go ahead and film how we're going to locate these parts. Let's go ahead and get a camera on that. So this is going to come through with a spring on it. And the large end of that spring sits in that recession. So we're gently just going to kind of poke that through the hole there. It is going to gently distort a couple of your little fins in the radiator, but it's an unavoidable process that you have to do. See how it kind of pulled the little fins there out of the way, but doesn't hurt the core. And then you center the spring in there, and that gives a little bit of pressure. Then you put a pad over top of it and lock her down. Not ideal. I'm willing to bet if you sprung a leak in that core that they would not want to warranty the radiator after you modified it like that. So do this at your own risk. Understand this is your financial responsibility, that you're changing these parts. And to be honest with you, I don't blame the manufacturers for that. If I made a radiator and then you went poking holes through it and it leaked, I'd blame you too. So make sure you're careful when you do this, guys. doing that. Get through there and just kind of rotate it, try to help it go through. That one went through without pushing on a fin so bad. Now if that does leak, and hopefully it doesn't, but if that does, then you will see me pull my epoxy out and fix it. You will see me do that. I didn't want to epoxy that and fix it because it's old and beat up, but I'll fix this brand new one if I need to. It fits and it works. There's no other reason to warranty it, so if it's leaking there, that would be my fault, right? Alright guys, I'm going to do this with the camera off. All you do with these is you just take this little foam block, you push it up against the radiator on the up, you know, those little dimple holes go around the plastic piece, and then you kind of zip them on with that. Be careful, you know where you're going with them, because once you put them on, you can't get them off. So that's why I'm going to put the camera down so I can do a good job of locating them. I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done.